Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 17 of International Expansion Explained. My guest today, Lorenzo Fornaroli, is a senior executive in global logistics and supply chain management, and he has over 30 years of experience across a lot of different industries, lots of markets, and company cultures in operations, strategy, continuous improvement, third-party logistics management, and end-to-end supply chain optimization. Whilst he started his career in international trade in Italy, he progressed pretty quickly to leadership roles in both international companies, multinationals, and startups. So he's worked in the UK, Switzerland, he's worked in Huawei at their HQ in China. He's been a year in Saudi for the NEOM project, and he's presently supporting McBride on a company-wide supply chain transformation. And he's helping them to improve business performance and service levels for customers for FMCG and retail. He's got qualifications in operations, supply chain management, as well as Six Sigma. And he's done a lot of executive training in AI, Internet of Things, cybersecurity, and digital transformation. So you can see that he really brings a wealth of international experience to the table, having lived and worked across so many different countries and cultures with different competencies and progressing through lots of change and adaptability with a mindset of continuous learning and personal growth. So, Lorenzo, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to see you again after, I think it was a couple of years ago, right? 2-3 years ago when we last spoke.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago that we last did an interview or a discussion together. So, but for those people who didn't know you from that time, maybe you can just give us a quick, after I gave a rather long introduction, maybe you can give us a quick intro as to how you actually got into international business and a little bit of the way as to how you arrived at where you are today.
So good question. Thanks very much. So how I got here is through change, I would say. I started off in a very, very young age. I was unloading trucks in the afternoon hours to make some money. Then I started working before the army in Italy, because until you join the army, you can't really get a job in Italy. That's another story. So I was working in a warehouse, and I started.
Austria is the same.
Is it? Okay, yeah. Basically, they have to pay contribution for 1 year, so they say, why should I hire you now, right? So I worked in a warehouse where I've learned the basics of, packing lists, and which I was doing with a pen and piece of paper, and on the forklifts and all that kind of stuff. But it's been very good because I learned the basics of logistics operations. Then I was working. I was studying international trade, so that was a little bit my interest, I guess, working with foreign parts of the world and dealing with in an international context. Let's say I worked for 2 companies in Italy in again international trade and selling items for nationwide campaigns. So the famous ones where you would collect a certain number of tokens, bring it back, and then you would get a present. The present was what we had already prepared and sold to our customers for this campaign. And then I wanted to go abroad, so I found an opportunity in Scotland with IBM, which was initially a technical support job, which I enjoyed very much. So it was a jump into something relatively new, but I wanted to stay in the field that I was most comfortable with, which was international trade, logistics, supply chain. So that's what I ended up doing in IBM for about overall 5 years. In Scotland, beautiful Glasgow, beautiful people, beautiful sense of humor, weather not as much. It's horrible, but nice people. And actually, I should have gone now because I hear the weather is much changed since 25 years ago when I was there. So anyway, and then I landed in Geneva. Coincidence, I don't tell you the details because it's a personal thing, but it was very much of a coincidence. And I ended up staying there 17 years. I didn't speak a single word of French, so it was a little bit of a challenge. But Geneva is a very international place, so I started off in HP, then Gillette, which was part of the actually before the acquisition by P&G. So Gillette, Oral-B, Duracell, and Brown, Gillette Group International, before the acquisition by P&G. Then Cisco Systems, then a small fashion retail business, always in Geneva, setting up the whole supply chain from scratch. And then Honeywell, 5.5 years, which has been a very good school of life and school of professional mindset. And it's been a very, very good experience there. And so across these years, I've progressed from operations to continuous improvement, warehousing, transportation. I had fears when I was given the first job in warehousing because I'd been doing warehousing, but to manage it remotely was a bit of a challenge. But nevertheless, I thought, okay, let's try. And it worked out very well, I think. Same with transportation across all modes. Then leadership roles. So essentially, it's been a continuous progress. And when I didn't have the luck or my expectations met in terms of acknowledgement for my efforts, I changed. So I didn't wait for recognition to come. Sometimes you have to be, come to terms with reality. Things are not always as you wish them to be. So I decided to change. And until I got an offer from Huawei, at the time it was an agency in Beijing. They asked me to get in touch. They wanted to work with an international candidate for global logistics, strategy, operations, supply chain management, technology, working out the details of how to fix operational issues across the globe, how to improve relationships with our 3PLs from a contractual point of view, from a supplier management perspective, and helping out a little bit on the supply chain wider aspect of connecting the dots between supply and demand. So it's always been an evolution. And having worked before with P&L responsibility, you work with the idea of being assigned to a business unit with your P&L, and you start working horizontally with other functions until you get to work in a COE organization, so center of excellence or center of expertise, where you are working as an internal advisor, bringing best practice across regions, across countries, across suppliers. So you basically go and see where things are working, you bring the best practice, and you improve it. You use it to improve performance in other areas. And it's been fun. It's been very good, and it's always been a very good mix of professional growth and personal growth. I love photography, so I was able to take beautiful photos and to mix with different cultures, understand how to communicate. So it's also important when we talk about soft skills. There's a part that is related to, the hard skills can be the technical competencies you have, but there's also a part that is relating to the soft skills, how to engage with people, how you communicate or how you do not communicate, how you keep your mouth shut, and I had to learn to do that the hard way. How do you sometimes observe? I learned a lot the value of observing in China, because
Yes.
I didn't speak Chinese. I had learned a little bit towards the end. So I was a good observer. I was understanding by observing people, why are they not communicating, why are they not taking a decision, why are they waiting, or just because I didn't know what they were talking about in some occasions where meetings were in Chinese. So I would wait and observe and understand. And so that was a very good school of humility, because you come with a lot of skills and experience, but then they put you back to zero because you are worth this much because you cannot communicate. So that's been a very good experience to learn, to observe, to take time before you take a decision. Came back because of COVID, unfortunately, and then after a little bit of time in Geneva, I went back to sort of travels with work, and I ended up in Lyon, where I spent 1 year as a director of supply chain services, so serving multiple customers, both external customers or investors, let's say, and internal customers, different economic sectors, so food, media, technology, water, mobility, energy, working on very cool stuff, planning the city of the future with a lot of smart people. And I stayed there for about a year, and came back about a year ago. And so I've basically accumulated bits and pieces of experience, both technically speaking and also from a personal point of view, that allow you to grow when it comes to communicating with people, when it comes to having this sort of T-shaped, collaboration whereby the T is the vertical skills and the horizontal bar of the T is the end-to-end view you have to have as a manager. So that's been a very good school of life, changing cultures, changing companies, company cultures, industries, sectors, regions. And I'm now hopefully giving my best, working with McBride, initially working to support the company for an RFQ at European level on FTL, LTL, and groupage, and now heading up customer service with dual function. One is running the operations, and the second one is more organizational redesign, improving the quality and streamlining the operations to better support customers, and at the same time to provide one single consistent communication and set of values and performance to internal customers and to external customers at regional level, so with consistent approach. So there's been a lot of changes, a lot of areas that I've dived into, and so far it's been extremely pleasant experience and very enriching. So
Good to hear. And I mean, I think there are always some things that when you decide to move from one position to another position, or from one company to another position, you always have your motivators in the things that maybe you didn't enjoy so much in the company that you were already in. And it's always like a mix of things that didn't work out so well for you in the past, or things that you decide you don't want to live with in the past, or things that you want to move to, in the sense of, this is a company where I feel that I can learn something, or
sure.
this is something that, this is a step up for me,
Yeah.
or those
Yeah, I mean,
kind of things. It's always a mix, isn't it? I mean,
it is absolutely, yes. And of course, it depends on your values, on what you're willing to give up, what you're not willing to give up for. And for example, integrity, that I've seen issues in, at least in a couple of 2 or 3 places which ended up deciding to take another course of action. And otherwise, it's always been good, the idea of saying, I'm trying something new. You dare a little bit more. You go a little bit out of your comfort zone, but you're also challenged by the new, by the excitement of trying of something new for yourself as a person and also as a professional. In some cases, you didn't get the recognition that you were hoping to get with the work, with the quality of work you were delivering, or the speed at which change was happening was not my desired one, let's say. And so you realize, okay, is it worth it to stay here? Should I consider a change? For example, China, I took it also because I thought I was 46, 47, 48 at the time. I can't remember. I thought, okay, this could be an opportunity also to acquire more skills, because once you turn 50, you are allegedly slow at learning new concepts. You're not learning as fast. You're old. You are costing a lot of money. Probably you could get a couple of students fresh from university for your same contract. Then what you get, of course, it's a different story. So I thought, okay, how can I continue to remain marketable in my field? So I thought, okay, if I go to Asia, I put a little bit of another piece of the puzzle in my experience. And it's always been a matter of sharing what you've learned, because at least that makes me feel good if I can share, if I can coach people, but at the same time, if you can also learn something. So I want to do a job where I can learn something new. If I don't, then I'll end up, I wouldn't say bored, but you want to be challenged with something new. So it's always been a good opportunity to do both, to share and to learn at the same time. And so every time I've learned something more, and I've also been able to share, and this has been a good experience in an international context. So working with people from multiple countries, multiple cultures. Communication as a leader also has to change, has to adapt according to who you're speaking to.
yes.
So I think it's also for us as leaders or team leaders or managers, people managers, to adapt the communication, to understand what are the subtle features of communication of your team members or the people you are speaking with, and understanding how to adjust your communication according to who you're speaking to, which is a good thing that you learn with time and with experience. And so it's been also another piece of information that I've been able to acquire through
Along the way.
experience. Yeah.
I mean, is that something that you always try to prepare yourself on before a new project? What is the culture of the company, of the country that you're going in? I mean, of the country that you're going into, at least? I mean,
Um,
it's a little bit difficult often to prepare for the culture of the company that you're
Sure.
going into,
The
but
culture of the company, you can ask a few questions when you have your interviews. I always ask, I wouldn't say difficult questions, but probing questions to know how they answer, right? So when they say, okay, Lorenzo, it's up to you. What questions would you like to ask? I always ask, what are the three things you would change in your company? Unless you tell me the company is perfect, they have to spill out the buns and they have to start speaking the beans, whatever you say in English, and start speaking about what goes wrong, which means it tells you already if they do say something, it means they're free. There's a culture of openness. If they don't say anything, if they say, no, the company is perfect or I cannot disclose or whatever, then you say, okay, God, this company is a bit, you know, blocked. Or if they're not, maybe it just shows a limited self-awareness. And so you do a little bit of research of the company culture, then you look at mission, vision, value, all that kind of stuff, which is, yeah, it's nice.
sometimes just a nice piece of paper, right?
Nice, yeah, exactly. A thing on a website. On the other hand, you get to speak to people. I did, for example, I didn't do it at all when I got my job in Switzerland. It was a bit of a, it was like a deep dive. I thought, okay, let's go from Scotland to Geneva. I did a lot of research before going to China. I had been already there a couple of times for work, and I'd been in the area. I'd been working with Chinese people, suppliers mainly, for probably 20 years or so. But going there to live there and spend your life there is a different story. So at the beginning, it was not easy, but I did go there twice first. And then finally, I thought, okay, wasn't 100% convinced, but for different reasons, I went. And it was not easy at the beginning, not at all. But it ended up being a very good experience where I've learned more about the culture, how they work. I have my own idea about China, about a lot of stereotypes about China, which are not true actually sometimes. And so it's a good thing because it allows you to have a real personal end-to-end view on how things happen in a country. And so both decision-making process, how it happens, why it doesn't happen sometimes, why it takes time to take decisions, or also how do you engage with people, how do you see you as a leader. So a lot of work you do to understand where you're going to spend a good number of years of your life. So absolutely, yes, I've done it. I didn't do as much in Saudi, but I had some connections, so I was able to understand a little more. And so, yeah, I think it's worthwhile to do that, definitely, to learn more about the culture of the company, but also to learn more about the place where you'll end up living and spending your days there, because it's important. Then everybody has their own requirements, family, kids, schooling, whatever. Everybody has their own situation, but it's been a good, I think it's something that I definitely recommend. Will you get all the answers you need? No, but at least it helps you have an idea or somebody else's opinion
Yes.
to take some conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to kind of walk that line between, okay, you have the, let's say, often stereotypical things of what is Chinese culture, or what is Arab culture, or what is
Even in
Europe,
Switzerland, I could
what
tell you
is,
things about Switzerland that I've lived, or
European
Geneva.
culture. The Austrians have a lot to say about the Swiss. So
Yeah, I mean, Scotland, beautiful people. There's good and bad aspects. When they ask me, what is the favorite country that you lived in, I can never give a straight answer because it really depends what items you pick.
yes.
Or what they say, the best company. I probably have one in mind, but never mind. But no, I mean, yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's
But when it comes to locations, you always, there's always good and bad things in each place, and so it's difficult. But I think it's a matter of even considering the fact that even bad experiences are always experiences that make you richer from an inner perspective, right? So you've learned something more, and so it's a good thing. Then, of course, if you had a good time, even better, right? So,
yep.
and so it's always been. It depends if you are challenged, if you're interested in learning something new, learning new things about new cultures, exploring. If you like the excitement of something new, if you get bored easily, then you end up doing what I've done.
But I mean, I think also to some extent it's also dictated by your personal life, because if you remember that during that job during that job that you had in South Africa, let's just say as an example, you were working in South Africa for 3 years, but during that time one of your parents was really sick, or something in the family, then you always are going to associate, however the job was, you're always going to have that association with the personal life. So
Absolutely.
I think that you have to always look at these things from a holistic perspective, and to say, okay, for it to be good, there has to be some good on all of the sides of the.
Decisions are always about your professional life, but also about your personal life. And I've made a couple of mistakes in the past, absolutely yes. But hey, I've learned, and we move on. And obviously, I won't live until I'm 150, but at least I will be able to take a more balanced decision next time. And plus, values change with time, So I'm much more of a thinker now when I have to take a decision than I was before. For some things, for some others, I'm much more whatever. Let's go do it, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Whereas once I was much more, am I doing the right thing or no? Let me think about it 300 times. So it really depends. You change with age, with time, and then your decision-making process changes as a result, in good or bad. So
yeah.
But also, sorry, the other thing that I wanted to say, the higher you go in with your job, the more you realize that it's not that much about technicalities, but it's more about soft skills, engagement, cultural, cross-cultural communication, and the change management, and everything that I'm experiencing in this moment very much in the current role. And it's a beautiful thing, because there's a lot that is related to change management, communication, engagement, clearly stating what you want, what your expectations are, or thinking with the mind of the person you're speaking to. So that's all about soft skills, and less about technicalities. And so obviously through experience across this 25, 30 years, you learn more about how to shift, the weight from technical to or let's say on top of technical, you also have a good knowledge or a good experience regarding on soft skills and engagement, and so it's a good thing.
For sure, it's an important combination to get right.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to pull back a little bit to the topic of supply chain, that was a really hot topic. Last time that we spoke, we were kind of mitten in the middle of the hottest phase of the pandemic, as it were. It was Q3, I think, of 2020. What do you see as the biggest challenges for most companies with their supply chain and logistics management over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, it's a very good question, but it's don't get me wrong.
It's a very broad question, I know.
It's difficult to answer. It depends on what your priorities are, or what your customers are, what your strategy is. So it's really different, the answer that I could give you, depending on what you want, what market you're in. If you're in e-commerce, you've got different challenges. If you are in technology, there's a multitude of IBP, the nicer version of SNOP providers that offer you pretty much all the same thing. You've seen a few technology companies in the logistics or freight business have recently had to, reconsider their expectations. Everybody's talking about nearshoring, but then are you willing to compromise, or the China +1 that everybody talks about? Fine. And that's what I said already back as soon as COVID started. I remember being on another interview somewhere, and I said it's a matter of understanding there's a compromise with working capital, especially public companies. They've got quarterly
big investments already in China.
But also the working capital part, meaning, how much inventory are you ready to place across multiple warehouses, so you have a closer presence to your markets, or you want to have multiple sourcing so you don't rely just on one source. Okay, fine. Then you have two suppliers. First of all, product quality has to be the same. You have to manage different transportation modes. You probably have different or multiple stock locations, or you have to have a compromise on working capital nevertheless. So that means it's a decision you have to take, which impacts financials, which impacts the quarterly results. There's decisions that are taken around technology. How do you put all these multiple stakeholders together because everybody's talking about AI and the ease at which you can get things done. There's still a lot of work that is done by humans, and also a lot of decisions that you have to take when it comes to putting all the suppliers together, finding the right platform that everybody has to adapt to. So you have a lot of costs. Who's going to bear those costs? Is it me? Is it you? If you want me to spend that money, what is my longer term contract so that I've got a firm confirmation that we'll be working together for a longer partnership? I've seen some issues we had to discuss regarding the implementation of a TMS, for example, or earlier with the platform. So a lot of decisions are taken now regarding IT investments, which are very important. IT or technology investments, very important, but at the same time, there's also a lot of decisions you have to take when it comes to capital costs, CapEx, if you consider that as a CapEx cost, by the way. And so how do you, and who invests in that? What partnership do you create? And also risk management. I remember once that was with Radu in 90, whatever. I was still in China, 2019. He asked me, how comfortable are you with risk management because of the issues we were having with China and Mr. Trump and all that kind of stuff. And he said, are you 70, 80%? I said, listen, I cannot tell you where I am, because if I told you I'm at 80, it means that I would know what is the remaining 20%. So it would be easier to address the 20. Nobody knows what is the 100%, right? So that's why everybody's talking about from just in time to to just in case. Anything can happen. And so you can never say, oh yeah, we are at 75%, we're at 80, because you don't know what the remaining or how much is left to complete your risk management or contingency plan. So the best recommendation is to ensure that you've covered all areas of, risks. It can be communication, IT, technology, physical transportation, another war, supplies, proximity of supplies, how many warehouses do you have? So another vessel gets stuck in the canal, you saw what happened, another COVID. So, cybersecurity, are you ready to handle cybersecurity concerns? How effectively are you managing your safety of your own data, of your assets? How much time are you spending educating your employees on the importance of cybersecurity? The more we depend on data, the more there's a confidentiality part and the more there's a dependency or exposure to risks. So talk about the cyber awareness. So a lot of things you can discuss when it comes to what could be the risks of supply chain, because it really depends what you want to achieve, how you're set up, how many suppliers you have, what markets you operate in. And so you have to be really very well open to consider different aspects and different risk areas.
And do you feel that since the pandemic that supply chain has become, let's say, a more present topic for top management? Because certainly before that it was always a little bit the orphan
from the sky. You've got a product made in China, you've got this thing made in China. Yeah, sure. Someone must have planned it, product development, must have found the supplier, stored it, shipped it by put it in a warehouse, packed and shipped the order up to final consignee. So things were not planned or imported, by the way, customs declarations, documentation, export licenses. So there's a lot of things that happen in supply chain that people were not aware of until, unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, but for the wrong reasons, for people in logistics and supply chain, there's been a much broader understanding now of what supply chain is about, because of what happens at international level, of the risks you are facing, of how complex it is when it comes to shipping goods by air, by sea, documentation, compliance, and warehousing, and how much you are planning. And you can talk about the forecast accuracy. And if you don't have the stock, you have a problem, because I will end up buying somebody else's product. If you have too much stock, you've got too much working capital invested. If you are a company that can afford the luxury of generating demand and then getting orders with a just-in-time business model, then, and as long as customers can wait, are willing to wait, then you can build your supply chain with a different setup. Think about technology, for example. So there's a lot that really has to be taken into account, and certainly these issues. The strikes in North America at the port. Plenty of things that have occurred. Shortage of drivers in Europe. We still see that a little bit. Now capacity is picking up a bit. It's not as bad as last year. So a lot of things have made people realize that supply chain is an important, which is why now we're starting to think about, CSCO role should potentially be eligible to become the next CEO, because typically it was either a finance or a salesperson who would become
Yes.
a CEO, whereas now there's more a notion about supply chain, because you really get to see the full spectrum, including also all the financials around supply chain, because being a good supply chain guy means also understanding financials, understanding performance, understanding supply management. I could say that I've been in procurement for 30 years because I've been buying supplier services, logistics services for about 30 years. So I could say, yeah, I've been in procurement. Have I been in procurement officially? No, but essentially I was. So
Yeah. No, it's true. And I mean, like Kate says, that the pandemic certainly helped the average person understand
yes,
that
yeah,
supply chains are on the one hand complex, and on
yeah.
the other hand, they're fragile and
And
expensive.
it's funny. I was speaking to a friend a month ago in don't know where I was, and she got me started talking about supply chain. And I said, listen, as to the first thing that I had in my mind, I said, you know what this means? This means someone developed it, they planned it, they found the supplier, they shipped it. Oh, by the way, export issues, compliance, documentation, it arrives late, what do you do? So I gave her the full spectrum of all the things that happen to eventually find something on your table. And she was like, oh my God, very complex. By the way, I don't know if I would be able to, if I would like it, because it's too complex, there's too much planning. It depends. If you like planning, if you like anticipating issues, which is talking about risk management, then you are a good logistics, a good supply chain person. If you are thinking about what happens to the customer and you're in customer service, then you're in the perfect role, because you know what happens from a customer perspective. So you really have to consider these areas. And like I think Kate, or forgot the
Yes,
name now, but I
Kate.
saw coming up.
Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's brought the knowledge and the awareness of supply chain to lower levels, to which is good, which is
Yeah.
what we all know, right?
It became more of a, let's
Yeah.
say, it became more of a day-to-day kind of thing
Look at
rather than a specialist
try and buy
topic.
a car now, you've got 9 or 10 months wait because there's no components. So there you go. Why? Because there's shortage of supplies. Et voila. So the price of second-hand cars goes up because you have to wait too long for the. So
New
that
one.
there's somehow something is going on in the supply chain. So this is when it impacts your daily life. Then you say, "Oh, now I understand what that means. How complex it is."
Yes. And do you think that supply chain professionals should be looking more? I mean, traditionally, let's say, often supply chain professionals were somewhere in the middle of the corporate structure. That on the front end you had the sales,
Yeah.
and on the other side you had the kind of supply, manufacturing, all of those kind of things. And supply chain was somehow not so exposed to the front end of the customers, as it were. But I think that customer experience is coming more and more into the realm of
So
supply chain.
I have two views. One is very negative and one is very positive. Let me tell you, the very positive one is that because of what has happened and because of the acknowledgement of supply chain, the value that it represents in a company, there is and there has to be still, but there's been a little bit of an increase in awareness of getting the supply chain guys around the table to meet with customers when it comes to decision making. We're actually running a project now on the order to delivery, and we're realizing that there has to be a closer engagement between the sales teams and the rest of the supply chain so that there will be no surprises down the line. So the
That
earlier
was,
engagement,
yeah,
the earlier is
that
the
was one of the things. That was one of the things we discussed in our first discussion. That
probably, yeah,
involving the supply chain guys at the
right.
beginning of a project.
Exactly. The things that I don't like is that if you think about customer experience in general, and by the way, I worked on different, we used to call it differentiated service capabilities, understand what are the customer requirements so that you give them exactly what they want, which is what I was doing in my time in Saudi, by the way, director of supply chain services. So I was funneling the requirements to understand what is peculiar to you, customer of the food sector rather than the water sector or energy mobility, what is the common requirement, what is the specific one, and then we develop supply chain capabilities as a result. So that's certainly bringing supply chain facing the customer, which is great. In terms of customer experience, there's a lot that I need to say. I'm certainly in favor of technology, but companies are using technology as a way to reduce their cost. And if you try and speak to someone on the phone, it's impossible. Dial 1, dial 2, dial 3. You get to speak to someone who doesn't have a clue if they answer at all. You have to fill in the form. Then they ask you to fill in the survey. There's no human touch in customer experience anymore. I was having an issue with, I can tell you because I'm pretty pissed off with them actually, with Brussels Airlines. About a month ago, they lost my luggage. And I could see online what it was. And I said, guys, I know it's at the airport. And I called the helpline, and the good guys are answering from New Delhi. So what do they know from New Delhi, but where my luggage is in Brussels? And I kept calling back, oh, sorry, sir. And they kept going on through with the same, prepared. We are very sorry. I said, okay, you've told me 3 times. Tell me where my bloody luggage is because I need it, right? So they gave it to me 3 days later. And all I could do is speak to someone in New Delhi. So I thought, okay, let me speak to the actual customer service of the airport. And guess what? They answer from New Delhi. So, this is what customer service is about. Get close to customers' requirements, give them a voice, give them a real understanding what the issues are. And now it's all fill in this form and people disappear. I keep saying, sometimes you should pay for your service or for your goods once you receive them and you're happily satisfied. I got one of my flights canceled last time because of commercial reasons. They had
not enough people.
Voila. So they said, okay, we put you on the next flight. But I paid for that flight. I didn't pay for the other one. So if I were to pay later, I would probably give, I don't give you $500. I give you 350 because the service sucked. So there's no chance of assessing customer experience after. It's all made on promises. And then all the good companies that really live up to the expectations can really say, we are customer driven. All the rest is just blah, blah. And then they get the money and then service, we'll see, whatever. So, it's, that's what it is.
And should companies...
And by the way, with all respect to those wonderful people in New Delhi, and nothing wrong with them, but it's just a physical location.
Yeah,
you can't be in New Delhi. How the hell do you know where my luggage is? Because the information that were giving me online was the same that I could access from my own laptop. So I thought I need fresh information. Oh, sir, we are in New Delhi. Oh, God. So thanks. So then what's the point, right? So it's just useless, but they do have a customer service. So,
yeah. And do you find that, or would you say that customer service needs to be adapted according to the country of the customer?
Sure. I mean,
China is the classic example in...
Yeah, to give an idea, when I was in China, for example, with Huawei, I was hired also because I wanted to bring some European in their leadership team to help as an advisor on different things, including supplier management, right, at the strategic level. And then the expectations, I called the supplier on a Saturday and a Sunday, said, dude, in Europe, we keep the phone down. Unless it's a very big emergency, I'll pick up, but I'm the customer. I said, I know we are the customer, but in Europe, things work differently. In China, you call the plumber on a Saturday, on a Sunday, 10 o'clock, 10 p.m., whatever, they come in 10 minutes, they're there. So there's a different expectation from a customer, depending also, like you said rightly, on where you are, where you're based, what is your local experiences. So I will never call a plumber on a Saturday in Italy or in Europe. They don't answer. Or maybe there's a 24/7 number and they charge you incredible amount of money because they come out on the weekend. In China, I call them, 10 minutes, they're there, ni hao, blah, 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 you get your things done and they go. So certainly, yes, customer service has to be adapted, but also your expectations have to be adapted to the, I guess you have to have a mix of corporate culture, but also you have to be present locally, giving the customers the experience that they expect in their country. So it's always difficult when you try and standardize the approach because you'll never get it right. I mean, there's always,
there's always some trade-off that you have to make.
And I think putting yourself in the eyes of the customer, it's always helping to get things. So do you think, that's Wakas. Hello, Wakas. I think nowadays supply chain are ready to anticipate and react to pandemic-like situation in the future. I think we covered this before. It depends how strong the supply chain of a company is, how strong the resiliency planning of a company is. What if a factory goes down? Obviously it wouldn't be a pandemic, but it depends how you approach a pandemic. What is the issue? Or as big as a pandemic? How about, for example, a major issue to your IT systems? The network is down. You cannot ship for a week. Remember what happened with this big what was it called? This big virus that hit. I think who was it? TNT or whatever, whoever that was 5, 6, 7 years ago. There was a major breakdown. I think we're still working with Honeywell, right? And we had an issue. Some suppliers got the benefit because they didn't get impacted. Some did because they had a weaker contingency plan regarding cybersecurity. So another pandemic, you can plan for the best for a pandemic. What if the next thing is something else that is not a pandemic? Are you ready for that? So you have to be as imaginative as possible to think about all the worst case scenarios of things that can happen, that can put your business on your knees, and then plan for that. Is it communication issue? What if the systems are down? Can you print off invoices, or the system is down, you cannot do anything, you cannot ship, you cannot, the more we depend.
I had a supplier once where they had a massive fire in the factory.
Yeah, what do you do? I remember once, actually, I think I was working for Cisco. There was an issue. We had a warehouse in near Roermond in the Netherlands, and nothing happened to us, but it happened to a factory next to us. They had a fire, and they were blocking the only road that was getting to the warehouse. So our warehouse was totally operative, no issues, but the road was blocked. So how can you plan? Do you have a secondary road, access road, so that in case the factory next to yours that is not even, goes on fire? So there's so many things you can plan to be ready and say, yes, we nailed it. We know we've got a continuity plan. Wow, there's so much you can plan. So it's difficult, but you have to be as negative as possible when it comes to scenario planning, or as imaginative as possible, and see.
But in the end, it comes down to cost, as to what you can afford to actually. It's all very well having a contingency plan, but if you can't afford to implement it, then
an insurance. Well, but then if it happens, then you say, tough luck. So it's nobody has the key to know I've got to do it this way or that way. You drink, let me have a drink as well. Yeah, why not? Drinking time. So it's difficult. It's not easy.
Yeah. And like James and Anton said, then on the one hand, for a lot of companies, they find it's still most practical for them to source from China, because at the end of the day, China is still the most cost-effective
and supply
chain for them. And the infrastructure is in place. They know what they're getting.
And go and negotiate new shipping terms with a new supplier in Vietnam. By the way, a lot of Chinese companies are setting up their businesses in Vietnam. So we go to Vietnam, you want to escape the Chinese, but then you're in Vietnam with a Chinese-owned company, for example. So, it really depends. Do you want to be out of China as a country, or, what is the real, there's been a lot of, I think, I'm not saying people have overreacted to COVID, but they're changing for what reason? Because they want to be out of China, or because they realize the importance of
spreading the risk?
Managing risk. And so then once you know exactly what your weak points are, then you can say, okay, we plan it this way and that way. So it's about self-awareness on your supply chain. What are your critical areas of risk and weaknesses, and
I guess these are always the topics that a lot of companies got hit in a double way, though, didn't they? Because they got hit, first of all, that they felt like they had supply chains that were heavily reliant on China, and they had sales that were heavily reliant on Russia, and the combination hasn't been a good one in the last couple of years, I think, for a lot of European companies at least.
So, when you talk about international expansion, as we call it, right, as you call it in your
yes, in my headline,
obviously, the more you expand, the more countries you involve, the more you have challenges, cultural differences, and international trade regulations, compliance, transportation modes, local rules that you have to follow. So there's a lot of things you have to consider. So the pandemic was exceptional, a perfect storm. Supply chain ex-China was affected due to factories closing. Yes. So So there's been probably I wouldn't say an overreaction, but certainly something that made people realize you got to have a contingency plan very well laid out. And now everybody's, well, not everybody, but A lot of people are thinking about nearshoring, and I don't have the answer, right? Nobody has the perfect answer. It depends on your business, where your customers are, on your business setup. Are you a private company, public company? There's so many areas you need to consider to make a proper assessment. And with a lot of humility, I think I've gained quite a bit of experience working on both areas, small and bigger companies, startups. I'm supporting also separately a smaller startup in technology. Different countries, different cultures. So you bring different sectors and industries. So you bring a broader view of what are the aspects that you have to keep into consideration. So the more experience you have, to cut it short, the more things you've seen, the more you become a generalist for the good reasons, right? The more you say, hey, you got to think about this and that. So, and that's what I'm starting to bring in my current engagement with McBride, to bring a lot of experience from outside to appreciate the good things we do and to suggest recommendations that come from experience that I have accumulated from other companies and see how we can. So every time you put a little bit of the puzzle, a new piece of the puzzle together. So that's a cool thing.
A few more Lego blocks each time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
That's
So, I mean, we are coming more or less to the end. So I'm just going to ask you one of my kind of standard questions. If you were starting out again, what would be let's say, the biggest piece of or most important piece of advice that you would give to your younger self starting out on a kind of international career?
I would say, based on how I was, do not overreact when you see things that are not going the way you expect them to go. Wait, watch, see, draw your own conclusions, and keep everything into consideration. Be a little bit more empathetic, because I was a little bit more impulsive, I would say, at my younger age. And then I've learned to be more relaxed when it comes to decision making. Now I'm much more wiser. But certainly, and I'm happy about the changes I've taken, because they were all for the good reasons. But I would have probably reacted in a different way. I've learned a lot. And I remember a good old manager, unfortunately passed away, Jerry Brody from IBM. I was very pissed once at some BS that had happened in the office. And he said, Lorenzo, I know this guy, he told me all the things he could tell me about. But he said, Lorenzo, forget it. You go home tonight, open a bottle of wine, enjoy life. You come back tomorrow morning and you see that email that you're about to send, and you say, I don't even spend the time. So you get, so actually that's the value of time. I read once an article that I kept a copy of, the value of time when something wrong happens. So certainly spend time investing in culture, traveling, because it's the best school of life, but at the same time, leave the time it takes for time to give you the answer to your question. So let time work out an answer for you, because sometimes you realize and you see, just gonna leave it, or sometimes you realize things resolve by themselves, not doing anything. Sometimes you've done something too fast, too soon. I'm not saying not to be fast, because I still bring quite a lot of energy in my job, but at the same time, sometimes you say, hang on a minute, let's see what happens. So you wait. So sometimes being impulsive is not always the good thing. It's good for some things, but for others. So that's my best advice that I would give to myself. Travel, explore the world, explore cultures, but at the same time, decisions take a little bit more time before you commit, or before you put feelings in writing. I've learned never to say, I was shocked, or I was happy, or your email made me feel nothing. Facts. 2 lines. This is what happens. These are the facts. I leave emotions out. Takes a little bit of time. You read it again. You reread it. You can happy. You cannot be unhappy. Who cares? Tell me the facts. So, and that's the thing that really helps a lot. So you have to take a little bit of time, leave the emotions out. Especially as an Italian, you have to be very good at that. and then you are, living a better professional life and a better personal life. Yes.
Yeah. Then you also have more chance to live to 150, right?
Exactly. But nevertheless, keep the emotions at a higher level when it comes to engaging with people, because that's very important. The empathy, the respect, integrity, respect in relationships, any levels, and this is, I think this has always been my advantage. I'm happy about some of the choices, some of the changes in my jobs have been because stuff that I saw that I didn't like at all, integrity, corruption, things that I decided to was not for me. And but I'm happy that I'm still the person that I've wanted to be, and been I've kept integrity with myself, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that living life according to your values has
Yeah,
to be one
and
of the main drivers, right?
and I mean, work is always about getting things done, engaging with people. So you have to respect people, you have to be respected, you have to engage with different cultures, especially now that we are living in an international world when it comes to, like you mentioned, international expansion. So it's all about more and more about social skills, about engaging to the right level with different people differently, being cautious of their of the cultural environment you're in. So that's a very important thing that will help you in business, because business, like I said, it's made of technical aspects but also relationships management. So and it's a very important part, yeah, in an
For
international
sure.
context.
Lorenzo, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been
Pleasure.
a pleasure again to have you as my
Very
guest.
open conversation. I feel very good with you. Also, maybe next one in 2 years again. And
That sounds like a good deal.
no, yeah,
Okay.
it's a good. Hopefully, we didn't touch aspects of personal growth. The other, another I'm thinking about, right? My personal growth in terms of getting my piece of paper, my master's degree at 40 something, or additional education with MIT and this institute in Lausanne, a few years ago. As part of, so you always want to put some qualifications next to your personal experience. So this is good, but it's up to you how you want to grow, how you want to expand horizontally your areas of knowledge, at least to have some basics about technology adoption that help you. So there's a lot, anybody can grow as they want, but as long as you've got
Yes.
something clear in mind, that's the thing that helps.
Main thing is that people keep growing while staying true to their values, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It is. And logistics and supply chain and now customer service are wonderful areas where you can, develop so much, engage with people, and
yes.
keeping your values straight, but seeing all aspects of the business. So it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And thank you very much.
Pleasure. Danke schön. Thanks very much. And we'll stay in touch again. Eh? Okay.